Trump is furious over an election ad from Ontario, Canada, leading to a deadlock with Canada. He believes Canadians fabricated a Reagan recording to create an ad attacking his tariff policy, influencing the U.S. Supreme Court's tariff hearing. For Trump, this is unacceptable because if his tariff policy is ruled unconstitutional, it will bring disastrous consequences. He would not only have to cancel the tariff policy, but also face the enormous task of refunding taxes, increasing fiscal spending. Refunding tariffs would worsen the government's debt, and in the 2026 midterm elections, Trump and the Republicans would pay a heavy price. However, as with Trump's frequent slanders of other countries, the Canadian ad was not fabricated and was made to serve local elections, having nothing to do with the U.S. government. His habit of going berserk and attacking allies has deeply hurt Canadian Prime Minister Carney. Carney has stated that the decades-long close trade partnership between the U.S. and Canada is now history, and Canada will strengthen ties with trade partners like China and India. Notably, China has responded positively to Canada, stating that if Canada lifts the punitive tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, China will also lift trade sanctions on Canadian agricultural products. Canada plays a minor role in China's electric vehicle industry layout, and its sanctions were entirely to align with and please the U.S. Trump always complains that Canada takes advantage of the U.S., never acknowledging Canada's contributions. Over recent decades, some Canadian high-tech companies have gradually disappeared, leaving Canada as a U.S. vassal. Alberta supplies large amounts of low-cost energy to the U.S. annually, and Ontario's trade with U.S. states far exceeds that with Western Canadian provinces. Canada seems to have abandoned plans to build an independent economic system, willingly serving as the U.S.'s energy supplier and market for goods and services, effectively becoming an economic colony of the U.S. Yet Trump is not satisfied, openly calling for Canada to be annexed as a U.S. state. Although Canada's defense and security are entirely entrusted to the U.S., and its national intelligence system relies on the U.S., making it little different from a U.S. state in practice, the Trump administration is so greedy that it refuses to grant Canadians even nominal independence. Such bullying behavior is despicable, and Canadians have now seen the true face of the U.S. The APEC summit in South Korea is approaching, where both Chinese and U.S. leaders will attend and may meet. Carney will also have a chance to discuss trade issues with Xi Jinping in person, and I am optimistic about the prospects. After all, China and Canada have no major conflicts of interest. The deterioration of relations in recent years stemmed entirely from Canada's detention of Huawei CFO Meng Wanzhou, aligning with U.S. sanctions on Chinese industries. If the Canadian government shows goodwill and lifts sanctions on Chinese electric vehicles, China is willing to continue purchasing Canadian agricultural products. If the U.S. does not want Canada's energy and minerals, China can buy them in large quantities. Having an additional high-quality supplier gives China greater security and bargaining power, making it a win-win for both countries. Of course, this hinges on Carney completely abandoning any illusions of again serving as the U.S.'s lackey. If Canada harms China again, China will undoubtedly retaliate against Canada with double the force. I strongly support Canada improving relations with India. After all, Canada is known as the India of North America, and stronger trade ties are far better than mutual hostility and conflict. I have always opposed the Chinese government improving relations with India, firmly believing that China should not trust India again unless Modi steps down. However, I also hope India can prioritize economic development. Only when India's economic level rises will its people's cognitive level improve, reducing the market for political clowns like Modi. This would be good for the world. Of course, improving relations with India will not significantly help Canada's economy. Carney needs to ask himself whether China poses a threat to Canada. As the world's second-largest country by land area with abundant resources and only 40 million people, Canada could live prosperously just by selling resources. Is it necessary to grovel as the U.S.'s watchdog? If he can think this through, deepen trade ties with China, and firmly oppose Trump's protectionism, Canada will not only secure large Chinese orders, but also make the U.S. recognize Canada's importance and respect it more. Dignity is never given. It is earned. With Canada's resources, it has every ability to earn sufficient dignity. Regarding the Trump-Xi meeting, I predict both sides will avoid a complete fallout, each taking a step back to prevent conflict escalation. However, they will not reach a substantive truce agreement. Over the next decade or two, China-US confrontation will remain the world's central theme. Chinese people must abandon fantasies of peaceful coexistence with the U.S., as the U.S. will never allow China to surpass it. Yet China should not be overly belligerent, setting strategic red lines. Crossing those lines will trigger a severe counterattack against the U.S. While outside those lines, struggle and negotiation should coexist. The U.S. still surpasses China in comprehensive national strength, but time is on China's side, with its advantages growing over time. China must firmly reject domestic blind optimism and expectations of quick victory, preparing mentally for a long-term struggle with the U.S. This requires China to prioritize economic construction, develop its tech industries, and avoid being driven by ideology. As an ordinary Chinese citizen, I am highly optimistic about China's prospects. Surpassing the U.S. will surely be achieved by our generation. Based on this, I hope the future world is not dominated by any single power or plagued by traditional conflicts of interest. As long as technology and productivity advance rapidly, creating larger, better cakes, human progress is assured. Zero-sum games have no winners and will only lead the world to destruction. China must ensure that if destruction looms, it takes the viruses threatening the world down with it, permanently eliminating their ability to endanger the world again.